board commitment and one committee commitment, right? It starts to add up.
Linda,
Linda,
just to clarify, Linda, Fareed is also on this committee too. My apologies.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, he's on every meeting, every committee, right?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, so 2 is still the number.
We usually, often we see Brenda's usually always at these meetings.
Yeah. No, Brenda has been a great, and I know Maureen wanted to come today, but she had an appointment. She may actually join in at some point. She's keen.
Yes, that's right. That
She
I
did
know.
message me. She said that just like that she will either circle back with us if she doesn't make the meeting. So
Okay.
the staff's just working to get that that information for you, Linda.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I should have sent a little note previously.
No, my apologies for not getting that.
We're just going to get started in a minute or two. Are we live streaming now or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, just double check. Fatima, we're live
Yeah.
streaming.
It says live up in the right-hand corner of my screen.
Yeah.
Thank you for anyone who's joined us. We're just actually waiting for a few more people and we will get started.
Just text Brenda to see if she's joining. Sometimes she's delayed getting on.
Hi, I just want to confirm that you guys can hear me.
We can, Fatima. Thank you.
A cup of water.
That's empty.
Should we get started? I know we have, oh, that's great. Councillor has joined us.
Hi, everyone.
Great to see
Hello,
you.
Councillor.
Amanda just got me going here. So
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you here.
how's everybody? Good?
Good.
Very
And
well, thanks.
Good.
And with you joining us, we will get started.
Oh, I just made quorum.
Well, yes, it's not. It's great to have you here.
All right.
All right,
Good-
so
good
we
to
will
be
get started, and I just want to welcome everyone. My name is Linda Jackson, and I'm the chair of the Quality Tenant Engagement Committee of the Toronto Seniors Corporation Housing. It's great to see everybody. I hope that we have lots of people that are tuning in today. We have a full agenda with some great updates that we're going to look at. I would just like to acknowledge, thank you, Tom, for joining us. Many of you may know that Tom will be moving over for a temporary assignment to Toronto Community Housing. And we're very pleased that Jill Batta will be coming to the Toronto Seniors Community Housing starting August 9th. But we're happy to have you here, Tom, and get to see all the great work that you've been leading. The meeting today will focus on three kind of very connected themes, and it is all around tenant engagement. We are looking at giving a very thorough update, and thank you very much to Arlene, who will be presenting this on our tenant engagement work underway. Our environmental scan that's been completed, and a lot of input that we have had from various tenants and from STAC, and we'll be giving an update on that. We will be looking at the operational dashboard that it gets better every time in terms of actually the clarity of seeing how we're making progress and areas where we need to continue to develop. So thank you, and we'll be hearing about that. We'll be doing an update on the tenant engagement survey at today's meeting and the plans for launching the survey. And I'm so glad that Brenda, you've joined us, because I know that
Yes.
you've had lots of ideas about the tenant engagement survey.
Thank you.
And we'll be looking at that. And we will also be doing a brief update on the some policies that were highlighted as extremely important from our tenants that we actually review and update. And we will be looking at that, our fund distribution policy, our use of space policy, and policy prioritization. How do we actually make decisions on which policies we're working on? And then several other reports from our quality improvement initiatives will be presented. So as you can see, the theme today is very much on tenant engagement and tenant facing work, and we look forward to getting to that. I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to ask if we have the land acknowledgement to put up. Thanks so much, Fatima. Thank you. And the Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges, and I acknowledge, that I am sitting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We also, if you want to just scroll down there. I would also like to acknowledge that Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in the generation or in generations past, and those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to these ancestors of African origin and descent. Thank you very much, Fatima. We're going to move to the approval of the public agenda. And welcome, Jim. Great to see you.
Sorry, I'm a little late. My computer crashed.
That's okay. It always happens just when you're trying to get on, right? So
Yeah.
At this point, we're just actually looking at the agenda, and I'm hoping that people have had a chance to take a look at the agenda, and I'm looking for an approval of the public meeting agenda. Thank you, Fareed, and Councillor seconded. Thank you very much. And I will now ask if anyone has any conflicts of interest. Does anybody have a conflict of interest to declare? Okay, hearing none, I don't have a conflict either. We will move on to the approval of the minutes of May 9th. Where did the time go? Thank you for the thorough minutes. I'm wondering if people have had a chance to take a look at the minutes and if there are any changes or additions to the minutes of May 9th. Hearing none. Can I look for, I'm looking for an approval. This is going swimmingly, Brenda. Thank you. And a seconder?
I didn't want to do it because I wasn't at the
Yes,
meeting. So.
We've got, that's approved. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the action item. And I'm hoping that people have had a chance to take a look at the action item to see if there's anything, and any comments that anyone wants to make on that, Grant or Arlene, on the action items.
We just made, through the chair, we made a minor change to how action item appears. So we've moved the items that have been completed just to lower down in the document, but everything that's still in play is at the top. So it's easier to situate yourself to what we're tracking towards.
Yeah, I found it much easier to read, and I really appreciate, this is an important document because this is actually kind of our checklist to make sure that we're actually following up on items, and that I really appreciate all the work that goes on in between meetings to get us to this point. Is there any comments about the action item? Any concerns about anything? All right, so I'm going to look for, that item is for information, so I don't need an approval of that. If you have any questions or about the action items, please feel free to follow up after the meeting. And we will move on now to the CEO update, and I'll pass that one over to Tom.
Yes, through the chair, and thank you. So just first of all, with the completion of our interim strategic directions, and Linda mentioned earlier about the dashboard. I think very important to us is our board and our staff. They see kind of our longer documents, more comprehensive documents, but just want to let this committee know that we are creating more public facing, kind of shorter, concise documents for the public to go on our website, both for the interim strategic directions and the dashboard. So just wanted to keep you aware of that, and that those will be available for the public very shortly. Jim, did you have your hand up on that? Okay, just a wave. Okay, thank you. And then also, what Linda was playing on the kind of the theme of engagement. Just want to share with the committee that we are now actively moving forward on what we're calling tenant town halls. So, everybody's very aware that, I had been through all of the buildings over last year, and I'm starting to move through the buildings again. But also, one of the things that I had heard was around, tenants wanting to meet more with the actual staff in the buildings. So, Brad has worked along with communications to prepare kind of a deck messaging when they go to when the building staff meet with the tenants. So there were three meetings underway in July. 9 have been planned for August, and the expectation is that the regions will complete these tenant hall meetings by the end of the year. So really favorable to see this interaction now kind of more formally occurring at the buildings with the staff and the tenants. So wanted to provide that update as well. And Linda, thank you for the comments and well wishes on moving over to Toronto Community Housing. Yes, that's July 31st is coming fast. Just want to stress though, it's interim, and I will be returning to Toronto Seniors. This is kind of my place of passion, and really just want to continue in the future to work with our seniors and help them to age in home. But also today, just wanted to mention that Carol Francis will be starting July 24th, and she is going to be the new director of People and Culture. And so that rounds up the senior leadership team. And so it will be very nice to have that in place. And right now, Dave Slater and his team are planning a very comprehensive onboarding for Carol. She was in last week, had a chance to meet with her, but she also spent quite some time with the People and Culture team. So really glad to have her on board. So just wanted to be able to share that with the board members who are on today. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions of Tom?
Just Carol Francis, she starts the 24th, you said?
Yes.
And will she be at the Yonge Street location, or is she hybrid, or how are we doing this?
Yeah, so through the chair, Brenda. So she will be hybrid, but and 423 will be her touchdown. That's where the People and Culture team also meet. They regularly meet there. But I do know Carol has already shared with me how she wants to get scheduled into the tenant town halls, because at those sessions, right, that's a really good opportunity for her to start to engage kind of at the front line in the buildings with the staff. So she is definitely very committed to being with the staff in the buildings, but essentially all of us who aren't directly in the buildings are in the hybrid model.
Thanks, Brenda. And I assume that Jill will also be very engaged in those
Yes.
those tenant engagement sessions at the buildings that will continue.
That's just through the chair to the chair, Linda. So yes, and this is something that Freed with our one-on-one really did confirm, even as it relates to the what's called now the tenants connecting with the CEO. That really is the role of the CEO. So in interim, Jill will be will be participating with those, but also Jill is interested in the tenant town halls as well. I don't suspect she would go to all of those, but that work with the connecting with the tenants, and then so there will good opportunity for visibility and participation with staff and tenants.
So is the town halls separate from the visits?
Yes, it's through the chair, Brenda. Yes, they are.
Okay.
And Brad, do you have, or Brad, do you have just a bit more comment on that?
Yeah, through the chair. So the tenant town halls are done by the regional operating managers, and it involves taking the leadership team, the supervisors, and the regional manager to the building. They go through a slide deck with the senior services coordinator and the superintendent there. Kind of a brief overview of the jobs, capital projects that have occurred and will be occurring over the next little time in the building. There's some information there about pest control and preventing pests from spreading within a building. Couple other informational slides, and then there's about 45 minutes at the end for tenants to ask the regional leadership team questions at these events.
And so that's senior management, regional people. And then the continuation of the meetings in the building will just be the CEO, interim CEO work. Will the interim CEO also attend the town hall?
Through the chair to Brenda. So the interim CEO Jill has committed to the tenants connecting with the CEOs, right, to continue on with that schedule, and also with the tenant town halls, which Brad was addressing. You know, I had intended to go to some of those, but would not be as many. So I think for Jill it will just be, you know, kind of on an ad hoc basis to get to some of those. But those the tenant town halls are really for the staff and the tenants connecting on those building issues.
And will that be by building, or is it done by
Yes.
region? So
all of the buildings will be done in the regions. Yes.
it will be town halls in each of the buildings. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot to organize.
Thank you. And it's good that we've got a team that is actually really getting to our senior team, getting to know the tenants. So we'll welcome Jill to the next quality tenant engagement committee. And thank you for your update, Tom, and all the best. And we look forward to having you back.
Yes.
So, and to that, I think that was an information report. So we will go to item 8, which is the operational dashboard. And for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, this is a dashboard that we use to actually keep track of the key operational items that are relevant to quality. And to tenant engagement. And I'm going to ask Brad if he can speak to it, and you may want to put up some of the slides too. Great, thanks, Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. This is the operational dashboard for the month of May 2023. Take you through some of the highlights of it. In the top left corner, you'll see it talks about the arrears. There was an overall decrease in the amount of arrears owed to the corporation for the month of May. One of the highlights, I believe, here is there's that 733 number, which is the number of tenants with unmanaged arrears. According to our arrears collection process, only tenants that owe more than 1 month of rent are eligible or are to be placed into the arrears collection process. And there is only one account out of that 733 that should have been in there that isn't. The other 732 accounts are all less than 1 month's rent. And actually, as of the end of May, we had 88% of our tenants who had a zero balance, which is phenomenal to get that, where 88% owe the corporation nothing and are up to date on their housing charge. With regards to vacancy in the top right, we did have a slight increase in the vacancy rate. We rose from 1.97 at the end of April to 2.08 at the end of May. But happy to say that we've put some measures into effect and we've got that back down to a sub 2 at 1.95% in June, which represents the lowest the corporation's ever been. With regards to work orders in the bottom right, you can see that the service levels always seems to be on a steady increase. For the first time in 2023, we exceeded having 91% of our staff work orders completed within 2 business days. And it's the first time in the corporation's history that we've had less than 1,000 work orders outstanding at the end of a month assigned out to staff. Administrative requests relate to requests for document support, rent calculation assistance, referrals to the senior services coordinators, and our service standard there has remained relatively stable over the last few months. Again, arrears saw a decrease. The decrease was just over $53,000 from the month of April as the staff continue to push files through the arrears collection process, and we continue to work with our partners over at the Office of the Commissioner of Housing Equity as relates to finding some of the mitigating factors that lead tenants into being into arrears and helping them to get out of that and maintain successful tenancies. The vacancy rate, as I mentioned, it rose for the month of May, just over 2%, and now we're back down under the 1.95%, which represents the target for the service manager, and we'll be able to maintain that. Maintenance and work orders, as I said, most relate to pest control. 91% of all the staff ones are completed within our 2-day service level agreement. There were 8,795 work orders received for the month of May. And I just want to mention that as we enter into the summer, we're just about to launch our annual unit inspections, which will result in a massive creation of work within people's homes in order for the staff to complete, but we'll work our way through that list once we have it. Pest control, we made some progress. We had 166 units that were declared bed bug free and 158 units that were declared cockroach free. This is work that we're doing with some of the lessons that we've learned from our pest control QIP that we're starting to now put in place, and we're seeing some progress out of that as we're better able to assist tenants through not only through the process of being treated for, but as well as I mentioned earlier, as part of the town hall, we'll deal with information that we'll be providing tenants on how to reduce their likelihood of infestations and being more proactive with regards to that. Administrative requests, we did see a decrease in the number of requests, the percentage that were completed within our 5-day SLA. That's really due to the time of the year, and it's the taxes that we're trying to help people with. We're trying to work with people with Service Canada and ensuring that their taxes are completed, which will assist them in maintaining their RGI eligibility. And that's the final slide. Oh, sorry, in community safety unit, we had 707 responses. Again, a lot of these responses are more for, we've been trying to work with our CSU, be more proactive, and we hope part of this will be an information sharing exercise. We'll be presenting the data in a better way, which is one of the things that the Safety and Security Quality Improvement Project really hit upon, was ensuring that we're effectively using our CSU resources within the communities. And with that, does anybody have any questions about any of this?
Yes, I do, Brad.
I do too.
Go ahead, Jim, and then Brenda.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
I had a problem because the serious violent incidents and other calls for service seem to have the same color. So it's hard to separate the two, which is which.
Through the chair, I'm pleased to say that this may be the final time that you'll see the information. We've redeveloped a new dashboard, taking into account some of the board feedback that we've had on the auction log, and we'll be presenting it in a different manner that just a little more clearly lays it out for everybody. With regards to serious violent incidents, Jim, there were actually 2 of them within the community, and the rest represent other calls for service.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
The same question, Jim, so thank you. So the dark blue that is under the green is not the serious violent incidents?
No, that's through the chair. That's other calls for service.
Okay, I had the same challenge. Okay, thank you. Brenda? I think you're on mute, Brenda.
How's that? Can you hear me?
That's good. Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm having problems with my screen. Sorry, to find the mute. Under pest control, you mentioned here that the pest provider tender is expiring in Q3. Am I correct on that? So are we going to continue with them, or are we going to a new provider?
Through the chair, that the pest control tender is a tender that's done through Toronto Community Housing, and then the vendors are assigned to TSHC buildings.
Okay.
Ryan Jones, who is the supervisor for our integrated pest management team at TSHC, was a part of the tender and the award committee that developed the RFP. The RFP has actually since been delayed as we presented TCHC with the results of the pest control QIP, and they're actually working some of the feedback out of that quality improvement project into a revised RFP that should be on the market shortly. So TCHC has extended the current provider by 12 months till we can issue a new RFP and have it closed with finding new providers.
So we won't get a new provider for 12 months then?
Correct.
You should put that there because it implies that we'd be renegotiating. And from our perspective, are we happy with the provider that's been given us? What's been our input into the continuation of it? I mean,
Yeah,
I know you've been working closely on this project QIP, so.
Yeah, through the chair. We've had some challenges with the provider, but we've been working with them diligently. We've presented them with some of our feedback as far as some of the things that areas we do not feel that they are upholding the contract. We've received credits back from the vendor as well as free service from the vendors as a result of that. And we're just right now we're doing our best to manage them to the contract that they have with Toronto Community Housing.
Okay, because this is an area of irritation, and since we're the frontline people, but we don't control the tendering and the contracting process, so that's always been my concern. So I'm just concerned that we just don't slide into a perpetuation of the contract, which seems like we're doing if we've given them another 12 months. I don't know why the reason for the delay, but you know, I just like to make a note of that and to have us monitor that because you know, we take the flack if things aren't happening. And if we can't control, obviously, the tendering process. And
yeah, this is our agreement with TCHC. Would you like to comment, Tom?
Yes, yes. So through the chair, and I know Brad has presented the quantitative aspects of how we've seen improvements in pest control, but just anecdotally, and this is one building. I was at 2835 Lakeshore West last Friday, and that was my second time there. And the first time there, pest management had been an issue. It did not even come up this time. Pigeons did, but pest management was felt to be more under control. But I just that does speak to how the environmental health unit has been monitoring more closely and following up. So no, not the ideal from service delivery, but the team has been working closely with them. So that's that's anecdotal.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Fareed?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. My question relates to the point that Brenda was making, and I think Brad partially responded to it. And I was asking about whether there are performance metrics in the pest management and control contract, so that if they are non-compliant, then at least we can have some penalties or some clawback or some additional services. And it seems like that's the case. So I'm satisfied with that. The other clarification, I always had some challenges with the serious incident report. And Brad, I wasn't sure, is this a total number of incidents or is this the one that we have responded to? And is there a difference and do we know what that difference is?
Through the chair, it's the total number of incidents that the community safety unit has responded to. It's not broken down in any in between proactive versus reactive incidents right now. That's something that we're hoping to fix on the next dashboard that we'll be presenting. And with regards to the comment about the pest control, one of the ways that we've been able to hold the vendor to account is that the environmental health team has integrated itself into the superintendent meetings, and we've been relying very heavily on training our frontline staff into how to hold our vendors accountable for the work that they're contractually obligated to do. And we've had a lot of success through those means.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry again. And the reason why I raised that point is because of what's in the news, you know, regarding the some of the contracts that that exists between public sector organization and private contractors. And I just want to make sure that we are proactive in that regard. And I'm glad, Brad, that you're moving towards the proactive versus reactive, because I think the proactive ones are the ones that perhaps would lead to preempting some of the responses that we have to put in place when these things occur. So I'm looking forward to seeing that information be provided as well.
Thanks, Fareed. And I know that we do actually have this item at we are going to do a little bit more review of this QIP because pest control is one of the QIPs later on in the agenda. But Brenda, did you have another comment?
I just wanted to note the question or ask, and maybe it will come up later. We had a team that was supposed to help tenants who were too unable to prepare their place. Have we had to deploy that team very often, and how many times? Has that been a successful solution as well?
To the chair. So far with that team, we've worked with 20 residents for preparation of treatment. That team, as well as we've utilized Toronto Public Health to prepare 82 units for pest control treatment. And we've actually supplied 24 residents with new beds.
Yeah, I saw that.
Their furniture was beyond saving.
Yes, yes. I'm happy to see this, and my one concern is the amount of time, staff time, we're spent having to deal with the contractor. So if we could just keep that in mind, that it's good that we're working and collaborating and getting some results. But you know, if the contract is bad and we're spending all our staff time trying to deal with the consequences of that, I just want us to be aware that, you know, there's a cost to us too.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda.
Thank
And we will chat a little bit more about this later on in the agenda. Is there anything else, Brad, that stands out for you? What some of the good things that stand out for me is that we continue to keep the vacancy rates low, and I do want to acknowledge that, you know, the administrative turnaround, because those are the kinds of things that actually make a big difference for people, and probably are contributing to things like the arrears issue, because if people can get help with something, it prevents that. So I think that it's another example of preventative action. But anything that stands out for you, Brad?
I just think it's that we've sort of started down our journey, right? We started with the vacancy, and then we've started moving into the arrears, and now the operations team's beginning to focus more on things like outstanding work orders and outstanding administrative requests. And we've seen a lot of progress as far as bringing those numbers down, ensuring that tenants receive a prompt response from our staff, and that our staff feel empowered to make the decisions and to provide the service that we expect.
Thanks, Brad. And I just wanted to comment that I had an opportunity to meet with the Commissioner of Housing and her team recently, and they were awfully positive about the relationship with the team, and you know, really feel like we're moving in the right direction in terms of working together to actually prevent you know, arrears and evictions. So just wanted to pass on. I know that you probably have heard it from Melanie and her team, but it was really nice to see and hear from all of the team members. I asked them all what was going well, and the relationship with all of you was actually the comment. So thank you for that work. Great. So with that, this is an item for information, but a teaser to that we're going to actually have a little bit more in the quip. We're going to move to the next item, which is our kind of our sentinel item for today's agenda, and I'm really excited about that, because since we started as a board several years ago, one of the areas that was really important to our tenants was actually the development of a tenant engagement model. We're not completely there yet, but we're on the pathway, and I'm very pleased that Arlene is here today to provide some overview of the work that has been underway. And I'll pass it over to Arlene.
Thanks so much, Linda, and thank you to everyone on the call today. I just wanted to introduce David Bawalda, who will also be presenting with me from the Barnes Management Group. They're working with us on a new tenant engagement approach. I'm going to make the leap of faith assumption that everyone's had a chance to go through the materials and read through the deck, and I'd like to situate the conversation so that we're not going through every single slide. We'll pop into a few of them, but just want to talk about just the generally how we're going to have the conversation today. I'm going to provide part A is around a background, and I'll give you a bit of a historical sense around where we are in terms of the timeline, and a bit of organizational data. Part B is about the environmental scan and the findings that we had from the tenant engagement that we've done so far, as well as the conversations that have happened with partner organizations and other organizations. Part C is where we require your input, and Part D speaks to the next steps. So just kind of that's how the information is divided in your package. We have 60 minutes on the agenda. We'd like to really focus the time on hearing from you and less from us, as I assume you've had a chance to go through the material and have lots of questions and comments when we get to the interactive piece around your input. So if we could please bring up the slides, and I'm going to quickly go through the content. I will not be touching down on every single slide. So if we can go to the slide called "Why are we looking at a new tenant engagement model?" And I just want to situate us very quickly to that. It is because it is, of course, our mandate as Toronto Seniors Housing. It is what we said we would do. And then it is also that some tenants are waiting. The interesting thing about this work is that, we're finding that more and more as we talk to tenants, some are really value the work that we do in the tenant engagement model, and then some really value just having tenancy, and they'll pop in and participate in things and use our resources that are available to them as they see fit, but not always wanting to be involved in all the programs that we have going on. If we could move to the slide called "Supporting Tenants' Wellbeing," please. So this slide, supporting tenants' well-being, which is just the one up, Fatima, please. That slide speaks to the objectives of this work. We are supporting we're enhancing tenant engagement, we're facilitating access to service, and we're developing and promoting innovative practice to help with seniors' well-being. I think it's important to know that our work is very closely aligned with the interim strategic directions that the board set out for us to follow. So I wanted to just make sure that we situate ourselves that what we're doing is very much aligned to the work that's in our strategic objectives. If we move to the next slide, building a new approach to tenant engagement, it gives you a little bit of a historical context as to what has been happening in the background over the past number of months. You know that the process started back in the fall of 2022 to find and secure a vendor. That work in terms of security of vendor happened at the end of March. And so we were able to work with Barnes Management Group to develop a plan. But as I came into this role in May, it felt to me that we needed to do a little bit of resetting in terms of how we went about doing this important work. And I begged Tom's indulgence to move the timeline out a little bit to the end of December so that we have time to do the really important work, which is the work where we speak with tenants more closely about what would they like to see and be part of a co-design approach to creating a new tenant engagement model moving forward. So that's why the timeline got pushed out a bit. The original intent for this work was to have something in place late in the summer, in the early fall, but we felt it was important to take a breath and take the time to have that conversation with tenants, staff, and partners to have everyone at the table together to come up with a co-design approach that everyone could be more comfortable with. This comes as a lesson learned, building off the quality improvement projects that we have already had done with staff and tenants previously. If we move to the slide that says we've been listening to tenant voices. So many times I hear at this board, you will hear lots of deputations that we're not hearing enough from tenants. We're not, we need to do a better job to hear tenants' concerns. And I just wanted to just situate everyone that since 2020, we've been using the data that's been collected through the Tenant Experience Survey previously with Toronto Community Housing to inform our work. That work informed the 100-day priorities when Tom came in and the corporation was standing up. That then Tom engaged in the listening tours, which he completed, hearing from 2,300 tenants in that opportunity. And then we continue to hear from tenants through a variety of sources, whether it was the quality improvement projects, whether it was through the Joy Connolly report, whether it has been on the work that we're doing on the tenant action funds and the use of space, which you'll hear more about in today's meeting. We have been really trying to engage with tenants and listen. And you heard earlier that the building meetings, aka the tenant town halls, have started. So that work to really talk with and talk to tenants has been ongoing for a period of time. And to date, based on speaking with tenant leaders, tenants at large, and the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee, we've heard from about 24% of the population in one form or another, in one forum or another. So I thought it would be important for this for the committee to be aware of that information as you think about what we're we're doing. When you hear what we're moving forward with, we're listening to a lot of voices in the process. If you can move to the next slide, please. So with this, the next slide focuses on tenant, after the slide, the tenant demographics. We talk about the engaged population. We have about 15,000 tenants representing 65 languages. Just in the listening tour alone, we were able to connect with, as I said, 2,300 of those tenants. But when we look at the number of tenants that are actively involved with us and actively, being vocal, we hear from just below 1% of those tenants. But those 1%, I think, are very vital to our work through STAC, through tenant leaders. We have we get the pulse of what's happening for the other tenant population through those voices. But what we've also learned is that different regions have different approaches to how they deal with tenant engagement, regardless of the model that was being used prior. And we know that in the Southwest, for example, there are no tenant leaders, but there's still good work that's going on through social groups and work that they're doing on the ground that are falling outside of the previously elected tenant leader system that was in place. If we can move to the next slide, please. We're looking at the tenant demographics here, and what I just want to touch down on is you hear a lot about aging in place. We're making a shift in this language to talk about aging at home. So the aging at home seems more human to me, actually. The aging in place sounded very sterile almost, and we wanted to make sure that we were approaching the work that we're going to do to support tenants, whether it's through social or health and wellness or through health support, that they were aging at home because these are their homes. And so as we look to the demographics, you see that we have this very large single population of tenants, and a large percent, well, most of our tenants are in a rent geared to income situation, with 44% of our tenants not speaking English as their first language. So these are all the challenges that we have to look at. How do we resolve in a tenant engagement model moving forward? The thing to keep in mind as we move to the next slide is that, all of these, that we have this aging population. So as we look to create a tenant engagement model, we need to consider a model that will stand the test of time. The greatest growth is going to happen between that 65 to 84 category. But between 65 and 84, that's almost 2 generations if you count a generation by 15 years, right? So it's you really that's probably not good math on my part, but it's at least a generation and a half. And it's so just thinking about the difference between being 65 and the level of activity or health you may be enjoying that may be quite different when you're 85. So as we build out a model, we want to build out a model that's sensitive and mindful for all of the ages that we have to address, because a 65-year-old may be in the same health situation as an 85-year-old, or an 85-year-old may be in a better health situation than a 65-year-old, depending on their health and wellness. So there's a lot of underlying things that we have to consider as we look to create a new model. And in the next 5 years, we're going to be dealing with tenants that are 85 plus. So that's something to consider. Yep. They're not the only population we have to deal with, but we do have to consider that population as they become more part of our structure moving forward. If we can move to the next slide, please. And just beyond the numbers, I just wanted to touch on quickly that, when we think about the tenants, sometimes we think about them in the context of being, they're requiring social housing for a variety of reasons. But I think it's really important to remember that it's just a hair's breadth that sometimes separates people from situations that are, they're policy advisors, nurses, journalists, lawyers, and then they're in our buildings and needing our supports. And I think it's important to not just look at the numbers and demographics, but look at the vibrant lives that our tenants have led and the vibrant lives that they want to continue to lead. And that's something that we have to continue to strive to support. And on the word of support, that is something we've heard back very clearly from our consultations with STAC, that word is a bit of a trigger. So as we move through the language of what this beast is called moving forward, what's the tenant engagement model and what it's going to do, we have to be mindful of some of the words that we choose to represent our work. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So this section, David's going to touch on quickly on what we've been learning. So it's conversations that he's had with staff, with tenants, with service providers, and thought leaders in this area. And by thought leaders, we're thinking about folks like the Ottawa Housing Corporation, who've been doing an amazing work in the area of engaging with their seniors population. But unlike us, they're not dealing with just a seniors population. They're more like TCHC in terms of a mixed population that they manage. So David's going to quickly go through a few slides, and then we will go to I will do a few remarks on the current and future state, and then we'll go do our consultation. So David. Oh, you're on mute, David.
Thanks, Arlene, and nice to see everyone. If you can go to the next slide, I'll get started quick. Oh, the next, sorry. Although that's important. In our consultations thus far, and engagements, we've spoken with over 237 tenants, staff, and others involved, especially community partners. And one of the voices we heard very loud and clear coming out of the STAC Principles and Methods report, which is also known as the Joy Connolly report by many, is this statement that we need a tenant voice at every level of the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation, building, region, and corporation-wide. And we heard that reflected really well when we spoke with Ottawa Housing. If you could go to the next slide. Oh, it's not there, but the quote from them, that something that they really told us was that they decided long ago to put tenant decision making as a part of the process in every decision they make, and in so doing have found great value. And we saw that reflected in the STAC report, and we heard that reflected back in many of the different elements of research we've done and consultation. And I'll share here, just as our approach as we were brought on was to review the documents already developed that informed this process and brought us to where we are. And I'm not going to go in depth in those, but we really wanted to make sure to include what's already been done in our research. Then we concentrated on an environmental scan. We spoke with Ottawa Community Housing, as Arlene alluded to. We also spoke with some of the service providers or community partners that are currently doing some projects around tenant engagement at Toronto seniors buildings. That included Canadian Red Cross, who have a tenant engagement volunteer program, the Nork Ambassadors program out of UHN that have been doing some capacity building around tenant engagement, and then Baycrest Foundation, who has a tenant engagement approach that includes more health indexes. And following, including that, we did engagement with staff, 28 different members of staff, including the SSCs, CSCs, the regional managers, and Tom. We spoke with tenant representatives in 4 different regions, and we also spoke with the Seniors Tenant Advisory Committee. And finally, there's one section of one quadrant of the city where they don't have tenant representatives, and we used that as an opportunity and worked with the Toronto senior staff project team on this to create a working group. That working group is made up of tenants who are not in leadership positions or representative roles, and that was really important in our design to make sure we're having voices of those who are not those who get to be engaged in many other ways. And we had 25 members join that. And before, sorry. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, I think if we could keep going down to the slide that reads elements of a model. And I believe thank you very much. I believe everyone received these slides, and there's a lot of in-depth information that's not represented here. We've collected a lot of voices along our research in those 3 areas. We found a strong consensus around the following 4 areas. One is that a tenant engagement model should work to find a balance between tenant engagement and community development policy that is built on a commitment to including tenant voices in decision making. The example we learned in Ottawa, rather than focusing on tenant engagement model of the language they used, they rather developed a community development policy and included tenant engagement within that, and including a staffing and resources developed around that policy. And their story started 10, 12 years ago when they developed a principle that said including tenant voices is going to be a benefit because the tenants are the assets of our community, and started to try out new activities of tenant engagement. Some working in some buildings, some slow to take on in others, but 10 years later, finding that through a variety of means, they were able to change something about how they talk about tenant engagement, and in so doing, measure success quite differently as well. And their story was reflected in what we heard from staff and found in the research that says, you know, for tenants, this is the important, probably one of the important findings, the experience of tenant engagement is people don't have a concern for that phrase. They want to feel at home in their buildings, and they want to feel a part of a community. And so bringing some of the formal elements of tenant engagement along with the informal ones, finding that balance is really important. The second point we heard is that to co-design the tenant engagement model with those, it's really important we bring those together who are going to benefit from it. So it's our approach to design is to say, well, we need this community partners who do some work in the buildings. We need the tenants there. We need staff and people representing the board as well to really understand what are the elements for the model from many perspectives. And the next is to introduce change gradually. We know very well from learning, from studying this now, is that each building is unique and has unique assets of humans, of tenants, of assets, of people who can do, who are ready to work on things and ready for change. And it's going to be a different pace of change in different buildings, or in different regions of the city. And being able to understand that change is gradual is going to be really important to the process. And finally, to give tenants an options and resources for how to get involved. So people will, as Arlene was saying, not everyone is entirely wants to be engaged as such, but if they know what their options are, it's easier to find the way to become involved. Okay, that's all. For now, that's what I'll say about what we did on that side, but we did work with the Seniors Tenant Advisory Group and our working group to advise us on how we might speak to tenants. And we were asked to speak to 100 tenants. And if you go to the next slide, we were asked to talk to 100 tenants, and but we used the working group in the STAC group to ask, well, what should we be asking tenants? How should we be asking them? And they really gave us a lot of advice on this. And together we put together a kind of a workshop when we met with them, an open dialogue as meeting with tenants that we did in 8 different sessions. 6 of those were in-person sessions in different buildings, 2 of them online. We also had heard from the working group that we need to address language issues, and we took the 6 highest used languages and had interpreters at those sessions. So we had language specific sessions. Is there a way to get to the next slide that has it has some images? If we can keep going down, this one, thank you. We designed our sessions around these 4 questions, and these were what we received as advice about what helps make good neighbors, what helps make a building feel like home, what helps build a community, and how can tenants help Toronto seniors housing to build better communities. We really wanted to engage these tenants not on formal elements, but to ask about their lived experience and their suggestions from where they were. In all our sessions, we had 172 participants all together across six with 6 languages interpreted, but many more languages represented. And we had a really good response, if I can say, in terms of people feeling appreciated for the engagement, but enjoying might be the wrong word, but participating in an open workshop style discussion and feeling part of the co-design. And so when we talk about a collaborative approach, we believe that started already when we started these tenant focus groups and we spoke to STAC in the working group. What we learned in these sessions, on top of that the co-design approach was starting to catch on, really revolved around people having some difficulty finding the difference between what is tenant engagement and building issues. We learned that there's a real common concern that post-pandemic, there's very little of what they experienced as community before, currently in their experience in some buildings. We learned that security issues are really a barrier to people feeling at home in their buildings. And so it's hard to have community if you don't feel like you are safe to do so. Then we also heard, and I think this was the value of the approach, that tenants really saw that if it's a tenant engagement model has to work with individual and collective responsibilities. And that no single definition of community or tenant engagement will suffice for any one group. And so we need to work on that definition or that description of what we're talking about rather than a single definition. And finally, there's a real energy towards finding more ways to get active and have activities and events happening in their buildings. Those that are led by tenants and supported by staff, but also things that might be led by staff themselves. If we can go then to the next slide, please. Sorry, this is just the review of what we of where we did our sessions. That's what I want to say so far about what we learned in our tenant engagement and in our research, and I'll turn it back to Arlene to take us further.
Thanks, David. So in the interest of just trying to make sure we get through to have the consultation with this table, there are just 2 slides I would like to go through. If we could please jump to the slide that speaks to the current tenant engagement model. And that model, the current model, we believe the way it situates itself, and in your deck you would see it's a slide that has a circle that says tenant engagement at the center, and then everything, these programs around it, partnerships and community-led programs around it. That's our view of kind of how it looks today, the tenant engagement model today. It seems to be much more governance-based. The model we think we might want to look at for the future, which is on the next slide, is really focusing on trying to put the tenant at the center versus the model for engagement at the center. So puts the tenant, what do they need, and then putting all the satellites around them to meet their needs. As I said before, this we've taken this work to STAC already, and there was some feedback about this. What's at the center, where it says tenant feels supported to live healthy lives in vibrant communities. Some of the feedback we heard was that this sounds like retirement homes or long-term care homes. It doesn't sound like living independent lives, and so we take that feedback to heart. But it was not intended to sound like that. It was intended to really express the view that we want to continue to support tenants in a way that works for them in the communities that they call home. So it really just wanted to point out that some of the feedback we received around the positioning of this work from STAC is something that we'll have to take as we move forward. So if we can move to the next slide, what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is about the co-design. And we need your input on what's going to happen in this area. So by co-design, what we mean is we'd like to later this summer and into the early fall bring together tenants, and staff, service providers, and others, and to sit at the table to have a conversation about what tenant engagement might need to look like moving forward. One of the lessons learned was that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So massive change is probably not the way we're going to go. But what does it need to look like? Do we have to have some incremental change based on the research that BMG has already found for us? How do we make that change? And are there elements of what we have to continue with, based on what we've been learning. We're still open to what it's going to look like in the end, but we have some questions that we'd like to ask from you today. If we can move to the next slide, please. So in all the information you read through, and I know we went through the deck very quickly, what stood out for you in what you read? What did you see as benefits or challenges to the approach of, what we have been doing, what we plan to do, and then what advice would you like to provide? So, you can it's open to anyone starting where they want to with those questions. And if you can keep the questions up on screen just for a few minutes so people can situate themselves, please. And then we can, through the chair, open up for discussion.
Thank you for the thorough presentation. I know a lot of things stood out for me, but I'm going to open up the floor for others. Just in terms of your reaction to the presentation, what stood out for you in what was presented, or if you want to provide what you see as the benefits and challenges or any advice, I think we're open to that. Brenda.
Thank you. Really, really impressed with the work and thankful for the hard work people have done. I know this is not easy stuff. And a couple thoughts I had, and you've mentioned it a bit briefly about language. I like your aging at home versus aging in place, because it gets away from bureaucratic language, right? I have a question about the word engagement, tenant engagement. Someone said something about it maybe being tenant involvement. I don't know if it's too late to replace those words or what implication there might be, because I know we've been using the word engagement, but sometimes I'm into language being clear in its intent and what you want. So you want people to be involved. It's not just engagement is too ethereal a concept, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Okay. I like going further up, the key findings from the tenant focus groups. And it seems to me in answering your questions, what helps makes good neighbors, what helps the building feel like home. I think we have a lot of good suggestions from the tenants or whoever else participated here. And I think that provides a good starting point, right? And I'm always big on breaking things down simply. And I believe that we do know those answers. It's the process we're working on now. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to get bogged down too much with process, because that can also immobilize you. So I have this general concern about, while I'm pleased with the consultation and involvement, I don't want to burn people out, asking people to engage, when really they want to see results, right? And COVID has certainly put a halt or slow down a number of initiatives that had been starting. So we maybe need to activate that up again. And I think it's almost like we need another 100-day plan. How can we implement some of these things for some easy successes that we can demonstrate to people that we are listening, we are hearing. And I don't want to have to wait another year while we consult. I mean, we have some very good suggestions here. They're all workable. Mm-hmm. Many of them don't have dollar figures attached to it, right? And I like us at whatever level of responsibility here, I'd like us to start talking in terms of implementing. So I'm really appreciative of the framework, which obviously we need, and the suggestions and the engagement process, but and I'm pleased by some of the things that I see here. It's very hard to tease these things out of people. So a pat on the back to Arlene and your team, whoever was doing this, for getting those ideas out, because I know it's often hard when you ask people, well, what do you want? What do you think? To come up with actual practical things. So those would be my general comments for now.
Thanks.
But let's get some action, is basically what I'm saying.
Thanks, Brenda. Fareed?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to pick up where Brenda left off. I mean, for me, there are a few things that stood out. One, obviously, is the demographic profile.
Yeah.
And the increase in that cohort. And I think that to a large extent, as Arlene said, would have to inform our process on a going forward basis. I think, though, that while we're sort of focusing on that cohort, we need to remember that there might be other individuals kind of populating the different cohort as some of our seniors move from where they are now to that 85 or odd cohort. The one thing that worries me, and I think we've talked a bit about this, and I think Brenda touched on it, is this whole idea of tenant consultation or tenant empowerment or tenant engagement fatigue. And I think having some quick wins or having some results or showing that we're acting on suggestions and ideas, because we've heard a lot from them, whether through the CEO or the regional meetings or through deputations. We've heard a lot from them, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to respond in a more fulsome way. For me, I mean, I see tenant engagement or involvement or empowerment as a journey, not as a specific point in time. And I think what we've got to try and do is embed that culture of engagement within our seniors population, so they feel that we're not going to go out and consult with them once a year or twice a year, or when we get a new CEO, but that they feel that they can get involved and get engaged and be informed throughout the year and throughout the process. So, I mean, I think some of that language you might want to consider kind of building into the model, because I'm not saying this is what was presented. And again, I mean, I echo some of the sentiments expressed by Brenda and by Linda to Arlene and David and their team for the work they've done in this regard. I think, though, we need to continue to reinforce that nature of continuous engagement rather than sort of this stuff being frozen in time or based on whether we have new staff or other things happening within the buildings that we're dealing with. And the final point there is I mean, I don't know, Arlene or David, whether there are any surprises from your perspective. I think, as I mentioned, the demographic piece stood out for me. Some of the comments I think also resonated with me. But is there anything that we have heard through this process that perhaps came as a bit of a surprise or we did not contemplate? Because I think that would be instructive to know, which relates back to the point I guess I'm trying to make, and Brenda made earlier, which is moving towards with some quick wins and some implementation so they can actually see and acting on their suggestions and their ideas.
Thanks, Fareed. I'll let Arlene and comment on that. And then David, if you want to comment as well, and then we'll ask Councillor Christian if he wants to make some comments.
Thank you. Through the chair, I wanted to touch down both on Brenda and Fareed's comments, if I may. So both of your comments talked about, let's not get stuck in analysis paralysis. I think is the sort of simplified way of wanting to address the whole engagement piece. I think the tenant engagement model is, as I said, it's a part of a solution. It is not in and itself a solution. We have been doing a lot of work since post-COVID. We have 45 partners delivering 204 programs across 83 buildings in the city. We've had a lot of work that's been going on the ground. It's this piece around the structure of how we do engagement in this more formal way is, I think, what we're trying to figure out if this is what people want moving forward, because the work to continue to support tenants in this continuous engagement that Fareed speaks of is ongoing. There is the listening to the listening tours that Tom did, the town halls that are being organized, the conversations with the CEO that's going on, the daily interaction with senior services coordinators and community service coordinators that's going on, and the frontline staff. There is the ongoing work that's being delivered through the partners to help seniors live active lives and and get involved in the things they want to do. There are the tenants that are leading programs on their own accord in their own community. So I think there's a lot to be sure that is already underway in the way of engagement. Whether it's qualified in the model that, you know, that has traditionally been held in engagement is something else. So this is, I think we're very much on the same track to want to look at all of these pieces of part of how people want to be part of the community. It doesn't need to be just within the structure of whether you're a tenant leader or not, and whether you do things X way or Y way. There are different ways to interact, and I think it's kind of like how we live in our home communities. You know, how much do we get involved within our municipalities or in our townships or our towns or our villages? You know, it's how we choose to interact. The opportunities are there, so we just need to figure out what additional opportunities we might have to add. And that's what these consultations have been trying to help us understand. To David's point earlier, there was a lot of, you know, day-to-day things like the pest management issue and the safety and security issues that came up. And those are things that are being dealt with in tandem, but they also contribute to community and how people interpret community and how they interpret active engagement. So, and then to Brenda's point, whether it's too late to change the name from tenant engagement to tenant involvement, that is precisely why we're having all of these conversations, to find out what is it that people want to call this, because it may end up being, you know, community, it may end up being participation. You know, if you know, many of us will remember the participation program, right? Like whatever that means to people, we might have to name it something else. We're not stuck on tenant engagement. So I hope that helps to address some of the thoughts that both Fareed and Brenda brought up. David, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Something that surprised me surprised us as we were going along is gardening. And I say that it's often the way that we perceive or perceive or experience community engagement, tenant engagement, however we describe it, tends to be on things like disputes around the garden, disputes around common areas, or the amount of people who come to I don't know, a bingo night or a karaoke event or so. And one of the things we learned along the way is there's so many community activities that are happening that are not visible. The experience of an emergency telephone tree is an example where those who are not first language English speakers will use one person who can understand an announcement will share what they learned with another phone person, and that person can go to the next person, then go to the next person. That's really important, especially during a fire drill. Things like that we've heard very much. And we also learned along the way, we've heard a lot of people saying, and I've heard this now from Brenda and Fareed, that quick wins or demonstrating successes is really going to be an important part of what happens. And we've heard that from tenants, and we've heard that from tenant leaders as well. But then also how we measure and how we describe success, how we describe community involvement is really important. And the Ottawa housing model that we learned about, they came up with 14 different questions. And they're not specific to, do you feel like being involved in your community, but rather, do you feel like you would be supported by your neighbors in the case of an emergency? How often do you feel like you can use the common areas? And by adding 14 different questions, you find a lot more information, and you start to uncover some of the stuff that's not visible to at a high level, that may be visible to some, but there's so many unique aspects. You get to collect some of that information.
And that's true community, isn't it? Because true community is informal and not necessarily visible, and you want to encourage those sorts of things. And
maybe redefining how we're looking at things. I want to give Councillor Christiana an opportunity to ask his question.
I'm here. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Thank you. I've been listening.
Jim.
There I am. Okay. So yes, I've been listening to the various different comments and following through the report. a whole lot of great suggestions and recommendations. I think, who was it? I think Arlene that just said, analysis paralysis. I'm a bit concerned where in some areas we're just overthinking things over the top.
Yeah.
Seniors are seniors. And look, I'm a senior, and we're are simple people. What we're looking for is essentially give us a quality of life, give us a clean place to live, keep us active. Activities are critical for seniors,
Yes.
and we want to feel safe. Okay, no doubt. There's some things I'm going to say are redundant. They're in the report, and also give us the support systems we need. So when I'm not feeling good, what do I do? If I'm alone, who do I call? What button do I push? What's my next step? And then when it comes to communication, communication is critical for everyone. I don't care what age you are. You don't have to be a senior for that, but seniors have maybe more challenges in that way. Just simple mechanisms. So we have 82, 83 senior buildings. Maybe a possible solution there is, having key people in that building that people could go to that are, I don't know, looked at as leaders within that building that they can trust, they can go to, that have a direct line of communication with senior management people within in this group here possibly. But the last thing I want to do is create another layer of government, another layer of complexities or we should want to do is creating this other layer of complexities. So I would break everything down. Let's follow that KISS principles. Trust me, it works. Keep it simple, and we'll get a lot more accomplished. So, and we need to begin to implement. Like, I'm not really sure what the next steps are after reading all of this. And I see one page I'm looking at. My pages aren't numbered, so I'm sorry, I don't know. It's titled Key Findings from Tenant Focus Groups. This kind of sums a few things up, to know options and resources, tools for getting involved, engage beyond the current tenant forums, a voice in deciding on what community is for them, more social activities, parties, excursions, cultural events. Yeah, of course, it goes without saying, that's part of the activity group. And access to common rooms and places where they can stay active within those buildings. And maybe we should have a look at all these buildings. Does every single building have a common area with various different activities built in, of whatever those activities are, a card playing room, a billiard room or whatever. And maybe we should be looking at, if they're not there, to focus on investing some money. Rather than spending them on consultants, we can spend some money on creating these activity rooms. And we already know what to do. I don't think we need Barnes Management Group to tell us what I'm just suggesting right now, because everyone here in this committee knows this stuff. So this is where I'm sorry, a bit frustrated. I'm simpler that way. I'm less spending money on consultants and more fixing the problem that we already know exists. And we know the problems. So just want to share that with you. And I'm hoping that we could now break this all down and start implementing some of these actions and creating that communication line, the quality of life, the activities, and some of the other things I just mentioned here.
Thank you so much, Councillor Cristiano. Your points are well made. I'm going to give Jim the opportunity to make a comment.
I just like to say that for me, what really stood out is the commitment on behalf of the city and the corporation and tenants to make tenants' voices the center of building the corporation. And I think that the benefits far outweigh the challenges that may be involved. And as far as advice, from listening to tenants here and in other buildings, I think that accountability is going to be the backbone of everything we do. I know in this building, there's a lot of tenants that don't feel that tenants are held accountable or staff are held accountable. And I think that's a sore spot that needs to be addressed.
Interesting.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, you know, that both sides there. Um, well, I think you got some good feedback from this group, and you know, I'm just reminding myself that you know, just to Councillor Christiana's point, we were asked by tenants to actually articulate the model for tenant engagement, and I think that it's kind of a different process than actually all of the tenant engagement happening in all of the buildings.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that that's actually where we but I get what you're saying in terms of moving on and actually being able to articulate to those in terms of what is our model for engaging or decision making. But I think we've learned a lot from organizations like the Ottawa Community Housing that this is actually a culture shift for a long period of time. And it's around actually how we actually engage with tenants every day on decisions that are important, and you know, building that culture in and being able to answer those questions. I think that we actually moved the dial on these conversations from where we started a year ago. So but I think we need to actually, you know, keep that moving. It's not a dynamic process. What stood out for me is our tenants are not homogeneous, and the approaches can't be homogeneous, and that's the challenge in terms of moving forward. Last point to Brenda, and then maybe I'll get Arlene to wrap it up.
Yes, just going back to reiterating people's points about how we have some ideas and suggestions. I'm just looking at these 4 points: what helps, makes good neighbors, etc. Is there any possible way, sooner rather than later, we could take 1 or 2 suggestions for each one of those questions and commit to acting on it sooner rather than later? So, for example, floor ambassadors for wellness checks. You know, we don't need a model for tenant engagement to act on something simple like that. That's within the purview of a building, of a regional office. ESL classes, having run ESL programs, you know, school board can do that, or settlement agencies can do on-site conversation circles, what have you. These things can happen now without having to wait for models. And I would like to suggest hiring of students for their placement within our buildings. So it's another set of hands to help the staff to organize things. They can be responsible for updating a database, say, for all the local area programs and stuff that our seniors can access, and help with follow up on things. So I think there are things, you know, we can do right now, and I would like to see if I can get some commitment, if not today, but that we choose a few of these things, you know, the calendar system. And let's get a calendar. I know there's going to be some policy issues about who gets to book space and all that. But can we commit to having potluck events in each building? Like every building should have a summer barbecue, and every building should have a seasonal
Struggle a little
fall
bit,
celebration.
Brenda, that as a board member
Yeah.
making those decisions for tenants, I think that
Yeah.
that might be a bit of the challenge of us getting a little bit into the weeds. What I
Sure.
heard Arlene say is that actually there's lots of these things happening, and they're happening actually because people are working together to create it. I just worry a little bit about us actually spending too much time in terms of deciding the priorities for
True.
tenants.
And I don't mean to imply that. I just want to get some movement.
Yeah.
And if there's some things that
Sure.
that are fairly benign, that don't involve these difficult conversations about models of engagement, et cetera, and policy. I mean, there's just some things that help with quality of life
Sure.
and social activities in the building.
Great.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just one measure, but I would just like, in terms of staff training, I mean, that can go to HR now. You know, to develop training for staff and for leadership models.
So we hear you to like act on some of these
Yes.
recommendations have been coming up in all of the reports. Tom, did you want to say a comment before Arlene wraps up?
Yes, just quickly, it's kind of a parting thought to carry you through the next few months. Just recall that, you know, part of our mandate was the request around this formal, for lack of a better term, tenant involvement, tenant
Yes.
engagement model. And so when you think back to Toronto Community Housing, when they tried to implement a formal model where there was elections in every one of the buildings, there was regional councils, it was not successful. They couldn't get elected representatives all in the buildings, nor for us would that be sustainable, right? From a how do you possibly keep that kind of structure moving forward? And so part of this, you know, this co-design and this work right now, we know there is so much, you know, tenant involvement going on, and there needs to be more. but part of our deliverable as Toronto seniors is this: what will the structure, the more formal input be for tenants, at the building level or at the leadership level. So we just have to keep our eye on that one, and we'll get that deliverable there. That's what we really just kind of want to focus on. So that's my piece.
Tom, I was thinking similarly. Jim, last comment, and then Arlene.
I just wanted to say that I think the recognition that one size doesn't fit all has been a real breakthrough in everything, and that recognizing that each building has a different culture.
Yeah.
And approaching it that way, I think that that's been a benefit.
Yeah, it's an aha, isn't it, Jim, in terms of us hearing that. And yeah, so Arlene, do you want to make some closing comments in terms of next steps?
Thank you. The next steps are outlined in the deck, but what I would actually like to do is to just respond to, just in terms of the suggestions, the wonderful suggestions that I've made here, in terms, let's get something done quickly. Much of what we're talking about getting done quickly is actually work that's underway. So staff training to be, more sensitive to the needs of tenants, that training is underway. Trying to work with the tenants and buildings that want to have barbecues and potlucks, that work is underway. We spend thousands of dollars on Tenant Action Fund work over the past few months that helps to support what tenants want to do, the activities that they want to lead locally. I think also, we don't want to be coming up with ideas that people don't want to see happening. We are reflecting and responding to what the community says it wants as well. So while some of these suggestions that seem relatively easy to implement on paper, they are being implemented. Some of them are a bit more complex. To Jim's earlier point about each building being unique, each individual being unique. There are some tenant leaders that are unique. Well, all tenant leaders, because they're individuals, they're all unique in terms of what they want to see happen at their building. Not just like Councillor Crisanti was talking about, the ambassadors on the floor and the leaders on the floor. We have 73 of those across the 83 buildings. So we do have lots of things going on. I think what we're trying to do is bring all of those elements together to say this is actually all about tenant engagement. It looks a little disparate right now, and we're trying to figure out how do we bring that all together, and how do we recognize the differences where some buildings want tenant leaders and some buildings don't, and they want to do their own thing and others don't, and how do we equitably distribute resources and supports in order to deal with the 83, not just the one, because we have to do both things concurrently. So I just wanted to leave you with that. And I would also just like to flag before I concluded that in order to push the work forward with the co-design sessions, I would like to just ask the committee, the Maureen and Clohessy, who's new to the board and wasn't able to be here today, and Jim Meeks as our two tenant board directors, are agreeable to helping to sponsor and add that board plus tenant leadership oversight to the work that we do moving forward. So we just wanted to confirm that, moving forward, they're going to be giving me advice, giving the whole team advice about how we do the work, what we need to do, work with tenants through the co-design sessions over the summer. We're looking at doing those sessions, 2 sessions in August and 2 sessions in September. It would be where people say, this is what I prioritize, and we are going to agree that this is what we're going to prioritize across the 83 buildings moving forward. And these are the things that we're going to implement because this is what matters to tenants. And there will be some things that'll be different from one building to another, and we will adjust accordingly, but we'll be coming back to the board for a final approval on the model later this year. But there's still work going on in the background that is related to tenant engagement, but not necessarily within the tenant engagement model, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message to all of us, that knowing that there's lots of great things that are happening at the tenant level that doesn't actually need this model to be confirmed, and that it's actually building as we go, and that we shouldn't actually kind of get in the way of that, right? We want to actually strengthen it. It should be a support for that. for that local level activity. I love the fact that Jim and Maureen will be advising from a board level, because it will help us as a board to actually understand our mandate and how we can actually support this as well. And that deliverable that has been like the first deliverable we were asked, I think, as we came together. So we do have a deliverable with this. So we look forward to you coming back. Thank you so much for the presentation, and actually for the great feedback from everyone. I think that that was a terrific discussion, and exactly what we were hoping to have. And I'm feeling encouraged. So thank you very much. We have a few other items that actually do also segue a little bit to this work too, around our tenant experience survey, because that's actually where we get feedback from people. And I think, Grant, you actually are up for the next 3 items. And thank you for joining us from your vacation. That's very nice of you. Over to Grant for the tenant experience survey.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda. And glad to be part of the discussion today. And so through the chair, on the tenant experience survey, I'm just going to highlight a few elements that are articulated in the staff report on this, and then take any questions. So our tenant experience survey is really intended to be a mechanism for us to get input from tenants across how we're doing, to get understanding of what's working and not working. It will be aligned and is in consideration of the interim strategic directions and the KPIs, the key performance indicators that we have recently approved at board. To help inform the process for doing a tenant experience survey, we actually did a jurisdictional scan earlier this year, where we looked at some other housing providers and got some context on how they did similar types of surveys to help inform how we might want to do our survey. As well, that included looking at what TCHC does for their tenant experience survey, tenant satisfaction survey, and also what we did back in 2020 when the seniors housing unit at the time was part of Toronto Community Housing and did a tenant experience survey in support of the integrated service model at the time. So through that jurisdictional scan and our previous experience, we have put together a high-level perspective on our plan going forward, which will include doing a paper-based survey of our tenants, as well as including an online option. Back in 2020, when we did our last experience survey, we did a paper-based survey as the prime, knowing that not all of our tenants have access to technology. The survey will be available in multiple languages, and we'll look to ensure that there's aspects to help communicate the survey. We are going to look at applying an equity, diversity, inclusion lens to how we approach that to help encourage participation in the survey across all of our communities. We're looking to do the survey in 2023, so this year, and then every 2 years going forward. So the next survey after this would be in 2025. And in terms of how we'll actually administer the survey, we are looking at doing potentially a survey across all tenants, so all roughly 14,000 tenants, but depending on how that plays out from a cost perspective, we are looking at options to do subsets of that, so potentially fewer tenants, but ensuring that we have a statistically significant result. We will also be gathering some tenant demographic data as we do the survey, similar to what we did back in 2020. And we'll look to work with the survey provider and other surveys to help inform that, including our previous survey. And our plan is to launch the survey in late in the third quarter of this year. So roughly in September, potentially into October. And we are on the verge of issuing a request for proposal very shortly, later this week is our target, to start the process to bring on board a vendor for that. And we will be doing that as a public procurement, so it will be posted publicly and available to all to participate in that procurement exercise. I'll stop there. We're very excited about this particular opportunity to gather input. We've just listened to a number of aspects of how we're getting feedback and engagement from tenants. This is another key way to do that. It will be a point in time type of survey, so we'll be looking to use the results of this survey to inform how we're doing against our key performance indicators, as I indicated. I'll open up for any questions.
Grant, maybe just before I ask other people, I was looking at the document and I didn't specifically see how we would get the language. I guess when we go out to procurement, we would ask somebody who has the ability to deliver this in different languages, or can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we did that last time. So the survey will be translated into the languages that our tenants require. Similar to how we do other communications, there will also be a communications plan associated with this, implementation of the survey to ensure that tenants have adequate understanding of the survey and time to complete the survey. When we did the survey last time, we actually did have a small group of tenants comment and help us inform the development of the actual survey to make sure it was something that was manageable for somebody to complete, and understandable as well, so that we could have questions that people felt that they could respond to. So we'll do similar aspects of that in the development of this survey as well.
Great, thanks. And maybe in the specs, even like an organization that has actually provided surveys to diverse communities. Any questions that anybody has? Brenda?
Yeah, I'm really keen on this survey, and I just really want to make sure we get it right, because you're setting your groundwork, and lots of times people get burned out by surveys and then don't participate, and then future involvement is very hard. So if we could just be sensitive to that. And on the demographic and ethnicity and race piece, I like that handled with some sensitivity, because it's an older generation that's not used to talking about this stuff or revealing their background, and there may be some hesitancy. If in the survey can be put in the context of, we need this information, could you participate, could you help us, with some sensitivity, right? And I hope we're asking the right type of ethnic racial questions so we can capture the demographics of our population, because we still really don't know fully the language groupings and the percentage, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm struck by the age demographic that Fareed, you mentioned. And, I think that we need to get this survey right, particularly if we're planning to redo it every couple of years. It's a good base.
Thanks, Brenda. And at the risk of putting you on the spot, you've been such a great champion for this. I would feel very good if the staff actually collaborated with you for your input on this, Brenda, because you've got such great expertise, and it would be good to actually have you at the front end with tenants as well. And I see a thumbs up from Jim. I would feel really good if you were there. Fareed?
No problem.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is a really important piece of work, and I think the success of it would be based on the responses and engagement we get from tenants, right? So I mean, that's a big part, and that's the part that worries me a lot. And I think in the RFP grant, it might be useful to build in some kind of focus group and test these things before we go to the broad tenant population.
Yeah, that's good.
Just to get their feedback, get their input. I mean, I suspect we'll have some sensitivity, as Brenda points out on some of the questions relating to ethnicity and language and that sort of stuff. And again, that would have to be voluntary. We would like to get that information, and we can encourage them as best as we can. But that information would have to be something that they feel comfortable with and are prepared to submit. But I really think we should do some testing before we go out in the field with this, because especially when you're asking our seniors to comment on things like strategic plan and strategic directions and that sort of stuff. I mean, I think we got to make sure that they feel comfortable and that we're actually getting the responses that are candid and unencumbered and not sort of motivated by anything other than their candor and ability to provide their honest responses.
I agree, Fareed, and maybe like we're looking for a consultant or company that has done this kind of surveying work with seniors, low-income seniors. Maybe Ottawa has some suggestions, or some others that are a little bit more. But I think
we could diversify the pool of consultants that we contract with.
Yeah.
This might be a great opportunity.
Yeah, I think we have. Yeah, that's great. So there's some good feedback. Grant, anything else that you need from this group?
I just want to express, through the chair, a thanks for the feedback. Definitely we'll take that into consideration as we move forward. We certainly want to have a very successful survey as well, and look to ensure that we're informed as we move forward, and that tenants feel that this is an avenue for them to be able to participate and give us feedback, in addition to the other methods that we've talked about, for example, today's meeting and other topics.
Yeah, this
So
makes
definitely, and then Brenda, certainly, and to your suggestion, Linda and Brenda would certainly like to reach out to you and gather any input from you or any other member of the committee that would like to
help
to support that.
Thanks. Thanks, Brenda, for your kindness
If I could-
and accepting that kind of putting you on the spot. But you're right.
If I could just add a quick little story. I recently was involved with a large sum of money for Black businesses and entrepreneurs, and they had a survey questionnaire that was so long, right? And it asked people such personal invasive questions, sexuality. What's this got to do with a business grant, right? It has so enraged the Black business community that they now refuse to deal with this group. So you can see how a simple, they meant well, it was a demographic question, but it just so insulted everyone. And most people didn't even finish the survey. So then they couldn't move to the next step. So I've seen how surveys can actually sabotage the good work you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, this is critical, and the board is just so open to having some feedback that it will be our first survey. So that's amazing. Thanks, Grant, for that. So that was an item for information. So we don't need an approval on that. The next item is our tenant-facing policies update, and that's also with you, Grant.
Yeah, you got me again here for the next item. So yes, thanks, Linda. So through the chair, we wanted to provide an update to the committee with regards to the progress around some of the tenant-facing policy work. So if you recall, at an earlier meeting, we had brought an update on where we were at the time. So since then, we have progressed through on several fronts, and this report in front of you gives a bit more information as to where we are with these items. So there are really three aspects to our policy review work that we're focused on right now. One of them is looking at the tenants funds distribution policy, or the tenant action funds. And that comes up in many contexts and relates, directly to the item we just finished talking about on the tenant engagement model, for example. The second big policy item we're working on is the use of space policy, an existing policy as well. And that also relates to the work on the tenant engagement model similarly as well. And then the third aspect of work is around looking at other tenant-facing policies and the priorities for those. So for all three of these pieces of work, we had Health Commons engaged earlier this year, actually started late last year, to do tenant consultation, to give us feedback and input that we can use to reflect upon and as input into policy considerations as we look to improve these policies going forward. So we do have, and that work was completed by Health Commons, and we do have summary reports from the three different pieces of work, one on the tenant action funds, tenant funds distribution policy, one on the use of space, and one on the future priority policies and priorities around that. With regards to each of those particular aspects, within the report in front of you, we've highlighted a few of the key consultation pieces and what we've heard from tenants. So around TAF, we've heard about tenants giving us feedback around it in terms of the purpose of the policy to help reduce barriers and help tenants feel they can participate in community building within their buildings, their communities, to help. And we need to help improve awareness of how people get access to the funds. We need to help look at how we can foster participation in the programs, for example, and drive out collaboration within communities. There needs to be more clarity around how the different roles and responsibilities work within the roles of tenants and staff, and then the underlying processes need to be simple and clear to use. So these are some of the things that we're getting feedback on, and it will definitely align up with how we're moving forward. We've had consultation sessions with the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee. So back about a month ago now, we met with the staff to go over the specific policy considerations around the tenant action funds, and we introduced the use of space and introduced the other 15 policy priority considerations. We actually had a fairly detailed conversation with STAC on the policy considerations, and we've taken that back now and had further conversation internally with some of our additional stakeholders within TSHC. And our goal with all of this work, whether it's on the tenant action funds or the use of space, is to ultimately bring back a revised policy for consideration to this committee and ultimately the board, but in advance of that, to work further with the Senior Tenant Advisory Committee on that. So to that end, we do have a meeting coming up in a few weeks. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head, but we do have a meeting coming up. I think it's August the 9th, to work with the STAC on what we'll actually have our revised policy and some revised process considerations that underpin that policy, to get their feedback on, based on their work to date on this. So we're very excited about this. This is a really important aspect of how tenants can support activities within their buildings. We talked about barbecues a minute ago or earlier in this meeting, but other types of activities as well, the gardening, all of this links into how tenants can be actively engaged in their communities and support events and programming. So we're really excited about moving this forward. There are definitely some opportunities for improvement, though, as we've heard through the various, either the work that Health Commons did or through STAC as well. So we know this is an area that we're going to work collaboratively on, and move forward on an updated process as we get further along. So our goal is to, as I noted, bring it to STAC, then come back to quality and tenant engagement at the next meeting, hopefully, if we get through all of that in a timely manner, which is our goal, and then ultimately an implementation after we get to board subsequent. Similarly, we're sequencing the use of space. We really see an alignment of the use of space policy, the updated version of that as it develops in light of the tenant engagement model that we just talked about, because use of common spaces, use of space in the building to support tenant-led activities, community development is very interlinked with what we've been talking about in the earlier conversation today. So we want to make sure that particular policy underpins and supports the outcome of that work. On the other 15 priority policies, there's really two categories there. There are a grouping of policies that are associated with what we call policies informed by a previous era, which is an interesting way to categorize them. I know they're really policies that we carried over from TCHC.
Yeah.
And then there's policies informed by legislation, and you'll see there are 15 of them. And the Health Commons work gathered feedback from tenants with regards to which ones are most important to them. And from a sort of an impact and an urgency perspective. So we have perspective on that from both the policies informed by a previous era and policies informed by legislation. And you'll see in the attachment on the report what those are. There's actually a detailed report behind that that gives us more information about why the tenants gave us the feedback about those. When we move forward, one of our plans overall is to develop a more holistic policy plan for the corporation. So we've been focusing on the tenants funds distribution, TAF. We've been focusing on the use of space. Now we have 15 other policies here that are all tenant facing that need to be reviewed as well. There's a significant amount of work required to actually do this in an effective way and to move this forward. So we want to develop a more holistic policy plan. And our goal is to bring that back as well, along with a policy framework for us to work on. So this is future work that is part of the policy teams work and aligns into our interim strategic directions as well to help us as an organization move forward. So I'll stop there. There's definitely a lot more detail with regards to this work, but if there's any questions at this point, our goal today was to give an update to the committee on where we are in the progress on these.
Brenda?
Yes.
Just the information, the 15 policy prioritization here.
Yes.
The previous era, though you're speaking here of the Toronto Community Housing, are we able to have our own independent policies, or do we have to link always back to Toronto Community Housing and parallel theirs?
So through the chair, we have the ability to have our own independent policies. However, in some cases, and we will, and it makes sense in many cases for us to actually have conversations with Toronto Community Housing as to what their policy is and how they're moving forward. So for example, the tenants funds distribution policy, or TAP, that we just went over, ultimately where this appears to be heading towards is a different policy than what Toronto Community Housing has.
Yes.
And the policy we have today in place actually mirrored, for the most part, what Toronto Community Housing put in place just before transition, with a few simplifications on process that we put in place back in 2022 about getting the funds. So yes, we do have the ability to have independent policies. In some cases, we just need to be aware that there may be alignment considerations between TCHC
I
and
understand.
our
So
that
of the
we should.
15 policies, I'm not speaking about the use of space ones. I'm thinking here of the policy ones, the 15 here that you've identified. And legislation also restricts us. I understand that.
Mhm.
But I just want to get a sense, because this has been an issue for me, that we're just, whole scale adopted so much of Toronto community housing practices and procedures and contracting. So I want to know, are we really going to be able to mold our own policy guidelines or procedures that is suitable to our needs? Or are we still going to be hidebound by practices of Toronto community housing?
So through the chair, I see this as an opportunity for us to express and meet our specific and unique requirements as Toronto Seniors Housing in these policy realms. And so, for example, you'll see, in terms of the high impact or most urgent policies identified by the tenants, tenant complaints, procedures, vulnerable definition, and unit condition were the top three that they identified. And in the legislation, tenant transfer and eviction for cause policy. So these are areas that we're going to work ultimately through processes similar, but not necessarily exactly the same as what we've done to date, to actually assess these and move forward with looking at opportunities to ensure they're meeting tenant needs. So we have some initial feedback from the tenant consultation that was done by Health Commons to guide us. And then we'll look at establishing processes for these going forward in terms of reviews.
Okay, and these 15 were the ones that were identified in that
prioritization.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Fareed, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just very quickly, and this probably warrants a more fulsome discussion, but I think we got to be careful, right? I mean, the objective here is to ensure that the policies meet the tenants' needs.
Exactly.
And I'd be reluctant to have staff spend a whole bunch of time focusing on the need to have a different policy if a different policy is not necessary.
Yes,
because there's certainly a number of areas where the shareholder expect us to collaborate. Things like procurement and some of the other stuff that we've got to do it. So, I don't think this is as straightforward as do we need a different set of policies for certain areas? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But I think we'll always, in some respect, rely on some common policies between the two organizations if it meets our needs. So,
I understand. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Grant, do you feel like you have these policies have been important to actually get updated? And I agree, going through that checklist of don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Do you feel like you have the resources to manage this 15 and plus?
We'll need to look at how we're going to resource some of this work. So we are bringing on board some additional resources into the policy team, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done and considered in this space. So, and these are only the tenant-facing policies, just for awareness. There are many other policies within the organization that we also need to.
I recall us talking about the fund last year at this time, so that's what made me ask that. So maybe you could just keep us up to date on how the progress that we're making in that area, and anything that we can do to remove barriers to getting this done. And I'm glad that STAC is supporting this. It's very important.
Thank you.
And our last item, and I don't think that we're going to do justice to this. I hope that people have had the chance to take a look at the quality improvement projects update. And luckily, we actually spoke in a little bit more detail on some of this actually at our in our dashboard. If you want to just add anything, Grant, in terms of some of because I think it was a very good report in terms of where things are at, please feel free to.
Thank you. So through the chair, I'll just provide a very brief overview given the time left in the meeting. So, and I need to acknowledge Mary Tate and the work that was done on the quality improvement projects. Mary has now moved on. Her assignment is concluded with Toronto Seniors Housing. However, her significant effort and expertise and knowledge behind the scenes and experience helped guide us through this entire piece of work, along with a number of people on the team and all the tenants and staff that participated. So just to recap, we had 3 quality improvement projects: pest management, safety and security, and the staff and tenant relations. We had the whole idea was to have a collaborative problem-solving forum for us to work together between tenant and staff teams to come up with opportunities to improve quality around these 3 areas, which were identified through the listening tour and other sources, the 100-day plan that was mentioned earlier, for example. There were some overarching themes that were that came through in all 3 of the quality improvement projects about how we use data, the importance of information and communications, how all of this work can help us build stronger communities, and that how quality improvement is a collaborative piece of work. With regards to the recommendations that have come out of each of the quality improvement projects, they're significant, and the details, so there are some attachment in this report. So the staff report itself covers the high-level summary of all the recommendations. There is an attachment, one in the report that has the more specific details. These are actually extracts from the materials that were prepared in the delivery of the quality improvement projects, the stuff that the teams actually work through in the meetings. In the pest management area, we had a total of 5 categories of recommendations and 24 actual recommendations. They broke into things around analytics, prevention, treatment, tenant support, and participation in high-risk buildings. And we've heard a little bit about this earlier when Brad was talking about the dashboard, but one of the big things we've worked on is improving our data. And that data is helping to inform where we can target activities and continue to improve. And some of the other things that Brad talked about in terms of supporting tenants as well. And, you know, a big thing here as well, and Brad mentioned it as well, was supporting and working with TCHC. You know, our quality improvement project is actually now being used to inform the future of pest contract and RFP requirements going forward on behalf of with TCHC. So this work is informing how we can actually collectively improve. It will not only improve within TSHC, it'll help improve within TCHC probably. So that's a really kind of a bonus. Within the safety and security area, there were actually 42 recommendations, which is not a surprise given the scope and priority of this particular item, in 4 categories: building and physical spaces, personal safety, community building, and the community safety unit. And so many different recommendations in here around community safety audits, you know, prompt notice on maintenance, more welcoming lobbies and buildings, you know, increasing and ensuring mobility is dealt with, staff presence, how we deal with tenants when they get locked out, ensuring that our community spaces are open and appealing, and a number of things. You can sort of see how there's an interconnection between the work we've just talked about and all of these aspects. And that safety is not just about cameras and locks. It was actually about having communities that people feel engaged in, they can participate in, as well as having some of the safety, more traditional things dealt with. A big part of this work is actually support from the community safety unit. We've actually started more specific and dedicated conversations with them around things like training, more data to help with our analytics around this, looking at incidents, the proactive, reactive stuff that we talked about earlier on in the dashboard, for example, increasing and looking at patrols, proactive patrols, third-party security resources and allocations, and increasing the number of community safety advisors allocated to TSHC. This is a subset of I noted 42 recommendations. This is a really key priority for us, and we'll be working very closely with the CSU. We actually met with them on Friday to go over this, and we have a more detailed conversation coming up with them within the next couple of weeks to follow up. Ultimately, we're really this is going to be a key aspect. And then on the staff and tenant relations, 4 categories, 34 recommendations, no shortage of recommendations. They're either in categories of relationship building, interactions, information and communications, and tenant leadership. Looking at things like, again, training, improving communications, developing more outreach to encourage tenants to participate in their communities, enhancing the tenant orientation process, which is something we're already working on. There's a whole building profile, a whole separate initiative, for example, that's coming together on that to support how we support tenants. Also, I got here, improving communications channels. And then finally, there was a whole segment of things that came through that one on what was called tenant leadership. And that's been feedback that has actually been brought forward and forwarded over to the tenant engagement work that we just learned about, because an awful lot of the conversation on staff and tenant relations included the role of tenant leaders and how they support their communities. So this is stuff that we really are appreciative of. In terms of going forward, we've already taken all the recommendations and aligned them into the interim strategic directions roadmap, if you recall. This is the list of more specific activities. That's a blend of time-bound and ongoing activities. We'll be including the integrated QIP recommendations on the version of the roadmap that actually comes to the board on August the 3rd. That's the design view of the interim strategic direction. So we've updated it with that information. We'll be doing quarterly updates through the interim strategic directions on this work. We'll also be doing a 1-year QIP report for the board. So a year from now, and a 1-year, we're going to reconvene the QIP team. So all the tenants and the staff that participated in that. Now, as part of this work, and I'll just conclude on this, there was a lot of effort at the conclusion of it to do a lessons learned. And there's a significant number of lessons that were identified, opportunities for further improvement as we go forward that have been articulated in the work. And this will allow us to hopefully build upon this work and collectively move forward on the next set of quality improvement projects as we identify and move forward on things down the road. So I'll stop there. I know that really didn't do it justice in the broader context of all the effort behind this, but I'll just say this was a very significant undertaking that we were so pleased to be able to move from where we started, which was really late last year, through to concluding all the meetings. And for more information, please refer to the report. The staff report has a very detailed overview of all the different aspects.
I see some applause from Jim. Again, the resource question for me, quality improvement doesn't have a beginning and an end. I wonder, Grant, if you can assure us that it's more than just lessons learned. It's actually continuous in terms of these big items, safety, pest control is not going to. So can you just reassure me?
So yes, to that point, and so a couple of things. One, a number of the things that are identified as recommendations, there are already things happening in these spaces. And that was something that we saw during the whole process of doing the projects. So it's building upon work that's happening, and that ties into some of the ongoing. In terms of the resourcing for this is where the follow-up to the QIPs, once we finished the formal meetings, we did some additional meetings with the leadership team and internally to make sure that as we layered these recommendations into the plan, more specifically the interim strategic directions, that we were considering all the other things that we were doing as well, and layered them in a way that would actually allow us to achieve the outcome. So we have done that. We will have to monitor progress as we go along, and we'll be doing that on a quarterly basis to ensure that we actually are making progress and adjust as possible. There are a significant number of recommendations here, but a number of them we're already got some traction on. And the other thing is a number of these also cross over between the different realms of the 3 QIP project areas. So we're able to benefit sort of holistically in some respects from this work.
Thanks.
And I see Tom I know you put your hand up there, Tom.
Yeah,
So
ahead, Tom.
You may want to add.
I know that Tom's a quality expert, so. You're on mute. We can't hear you. All that expertise is going to.
Through the chair. I was unmuted, muted myself. Here we go. So no, but I just think for myself, and I do like kind of what Mary said very early. Being an organization that is more data driven, right, and then up and then leads more to our accountability. And so as an example with the CSU around the data, we were able to, this initial meeting with the CSU, say, this is what our tenants are looking for, and this is what the data we need to help clarify this. And they're still in the process of getting kind of a system or systems in place to help support that data. But that's what we can drive, right? As an organization, we say we absolutely need this information if we're going to be accountable for, improved safety and security in our buildings. And so for me, that particular project, really drove home this importance around data and then accountability. Yeah. And you'll see it. I mean, in pests, it's proving itself in spades, and that's further ahead because there's more data there to work with. But we just need to be saying to ourselves and to TCC, we need this information, this data to drive our work, and then hold us accountable. What are the outcomes? You can't establish outcomes if you don't have the information.
That's right.
This will be really something that we'll have to continue to work on.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And I actually am heartened by the overlay into operations, because I'm already seeing things being reported on the dashboard, and that really speaks to that. And so this will come. We will have more time on this at the board meeting.
Okay.
So to digest a little bit further, can it wait till then, Brenda, or did you want to make a last comment?
It was just a question. So the recommendations here are going to be incorporated into work plans et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, because that's a lot.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
a
Isn't
lot.
it, Brenda? That's what I was thinking
What do
too.
you
I
say,
thought
40, 50 some
there.
odd recommend? I mean, that's a lot. So I'm just,
So,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
and that's just 3 QIPs. I mean, you can imagine it over time as we add possibly other quality, indicators. And but no, I appreciate the work. Thank you.
So just quickly to address that, and through the chair, there as we look to layer those recommendations into the interim strategic directions, there were some logical things to group, for example, to bring them together. There were related items that we were able to kind of combine. So, but yes, it's still a significant number of recommendations to be worked on.
So will this come to the August 3rd meeting? Did you say?
Yes, we do have it.
Slides?
We do have it on for
Okay.
the August 3rd board
Okay.
meeting as well. Yes.
Yeah, so maybe actually just to build on this, that can be actually, I think your comments about data, Tom, and your comments in terms of how it actually segues into operations would be great for that meeting. I think you actually have it in the report, but I think it's more the emphasis that we're hearing. So thank you again. I just want to actually say how impressed I am by the amount of work that is underway, and the rigor. These are big things, and I saw your applause, Jim. I think those board members, a few people had to drop off, but I did get some private comments that people were very pleased with the discussion today and with the results, and just wanted to thank you. It's the middle of the summer. I hope that actually some of the team members get a little bit of a break, and our thanks for taking time during your the summer, precious hours of the summer, to come to this meeting. So thank you, Arlene, as well, and Brad, everyone, and all of the support team for helping us for the successful meeting. Is there any
and a thank you to
comments?
Mary Tate? Maybe we should do an official.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Brenda.
Tom, if that's appropriate. I mean, I think she's supported us on so many initiatives in our board development.
Absolutely. A big thank you to Mary Tate.
Yes,
And
if
we'll
you
put that in the
can
minutes,
formalize
and
that.
maybe you could actually send her a note from our committee, and I'm sure that we'll
And the board.
emphasize that
Yeah.
to Brenda. That's a great point.
Yeah.
There's a few people that, like Arlene, who have been here from the beginning, that we have lots to be grateful for. So I'm going to look for an adjournment if there isn't any other items.
So moved.
So moved, and Jim seconded, and all in favor. There we go. I'm in favor. And we will see everyone at the next board meeting, and enjoy the nice weather, and thank you again for
keep safe, everyone. Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks for the leadership.
Okay, bye now.
Thanks, Tom.
Jim, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Grant. Enjoy your vacation.
Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, someone's getting a vacation. That's nice.
Yeah.
Tom, I'll talk to you later on. All right, so how do I get out of this?